I've been running my startup Revtrack for 10 months now. And so far we have made almost $200,000 with pretty much 95% profit margin, meaning that this is actually all our money. We're growing extremely steadily and quickly. And with this kind of traction, we could very easily raise funding for our startup. And something that I've been asked quite a lot of times from people is why have we not raised VC funding for our startup, given that we would be the perfect startup that probably a lot of investors would love to invest in. But despite this, me and my co-founder have unanimously decided that we will not be interested in raising money for our startup. And for me personally, that was actually a condition before I even got to this startup, is that I absolutely do not want to raise funding for startup at all, because that is just not what I want to do. And that might sound surprising to a lot of people. Why would you say no to money? So in this video, I'm going to go over kind of what it means to raise money for a startup based on what I've learned from this, from like being in this world for the past 2 years, from this startup and also my previous startup, which failed. And I will give you the 5 reasons why we have chosen to not raise any VC funding for our startup, despite the fact that we probably should do that. The first reason why we didn't raise funding is because it is obviously not your money. And this might sound quite obvious for those people who know about this space, who know how startup funding works, but it is worth saying, because when you get, for example, $10 million, let's say, in funding from a VC, that doesn't mean that you suddenly have $10 million that you can go and spend to buy Lambos or a penthouse or something like that. That's obviously not how it works. That money comes with strings attached. Specifically, what that money means is that now you have lost a bit of control in your startup, because basically investors now own a share in your business, meaning they have a say in at least a part of what happens with your startup. And what they expect when they give you money is that you spend that money as fast as possible to grow the company as fast as possible. So basically, when you see a startup raising $100 million, $10 million, whatever, that doesn't mean that these startup founders are now rich. It means that now these startup founders essentially have a boss who owns a share of the company, who has given them money with some strings attached. And now basically these founders have to work much harder for probably less money than they would have otherwise. And in the rest of this video, I'm going to explain what I mean by that, because it might be surprising to many people how by raising money, you could actually get less as a founder. So the second reason why I didn't want to raise funding for my startup is that raising funding is kind of like getting a job. So picture this, you have a startup that you have founded because you didn't want to work a job anymore. You wanted to work for yourself. You wanted to have the freedom to run this company from wherever you are, work in your own hours, etc., etc., etc. But now you raise funding. You get a VC investor to give you whatever money in exchange for a share in your startup. And in exchange, these investors now have expectations. They want you to do certain things with the company. They want you to grow it in a certain way. And often that means working extremely hard, because that is essentially what you have agreed to. And now, essentially, you have a boss that can, at least to some extent, tell you what to do. Obviously, it's not fully the same thing. They don't have full control over you. They have some control over you. So essentially, you're trading some of that freedom, which is something that was a big reason why a lot of people started a business in the first place, in exchange for that funding. And for me personally, that is not what I wanted to do. Pretty much the primary reason why I wanted to be a startup founder or an entrepreneur is not even the money itself. I mean, the money is great, but the main reason was the freedom. I want to have full control over my schedule. I don't want to have someone else who can tell me what to do. And with funding, you are essentially taking on someone else who now has the power to tell you what to do. Except also, in many ways, it's actually worse than a job. Because while you have someone to answer to, just like you have with a job, but at the same time, you are actually paid less, because VCs actually want to pay founders as little as possible. Basically, they want to pay you just enough that you can survive, but they purposely don't want to pay you too much, because that means that you might not be motivated enough to grow the company and essentially sacrifice yourself for the company if you were paying too high of a salary. And you work more because you're a startup founder. It is a new startup. They expect you to work extremely hard. And obviously, in the beginning of any business, you have to do that, right? Now, of course, the counter argument that a lot of people will give is that, well, in 5 years, 7 years, if you manage to sell the company, which is the goal, then obviously you'll be much better off. You can become a billionaire or whatever. But that actually brings me to reason number 3 why I didn't want to raise funding, which is that VC-funded startups are an all or nothing play. So just to review on the economics of venture capital, how these venture capitalists actually make money. So the fact is that 99.9% of all startups fail. Meaning, if you are a venture capital investor and you invest in 100 startups, probably maybe one of them will succeed and 99 will completely fail. So if this is the case, how can you possibly make money as a venture capitalist? Well, the way you do it is that for that 1% or 0.1% of startups that actually succeed, they have to succeed so big that they make up for all of those other failures. Meaning that for a venture capitalist investor, even if your startup does pretty well, like you sell it for $10 million or something, which for you individually as a founder would be life-changing, for a venture capitalist, that is simply not good enough, because the startup has to not only make the VC their money back for that investment, but also for all of the other investments that have returned nothing. What this means is that as an investor in a startup, you have to push the startup to go for a very, very big exit. So you have to push the startup to grow to the biggest possible scale that it can be. And you might be asking, well, okay, Thomas, what is so bad about that? Don't you want to have $1 billion exit? Don't you want the fastest possible growth for your startup? That's going to make you rich, right? Well, sure. But obviously this comes with a lot of cost in the short run. For example, for your lifestyle, you have to sacrifice all your life to growing this startup as fast as possible. What if you're not interested in doing that? What if you just want like a lifestyle business where you make a decent amount of income, nothing that's going to make you a billionaire, but enough for yourself personally? Like you might have a startup that you could sell for an amount that could make you $10 million right now, but if you're VC funded, they will be pushing you to decline all those offers and keep pushing until that $1 billion unicorn status. And what might happen before you ever get to the unicorn status is that you fail. You put all your money into growing, and at some point it simply doesn't work anymore. And when you could have had that exit that is life-changing for you personally, but not good enough for a VC, you now end up with nothing. It's an all or nothing play. VC funding makes sense if you're interested in becoming a billionaire, sure, but you don't necessarily need $1 billion. Like for me personally, the difference between $10 million and $1 billion, there's absolutely nothing that I want that I cannot get with $10 million that I get with $1 billion. So for me, it makes no sense to essentially sacrifice everything for that 0.01% chance of $1 billion. Which brings me to reason number 4, which is the growth at all costs mentality. So do you ever wonder why so many companies start off being really good, offering amazing customer service, just big, very, very good value, and then as they get bigger, they eventually become much, much worse. They might offer a product that you want to use, but their customer service is terrible, like everything like that. Well, that happens largely, in my opinion, because of venture capital and because of this growth at all costs mentality. Again, because of these economics of venture capital that we just discussed, where they want the company to grow as fast as possible at all costs, what it means that in some places they have to cut corners. A VC will push you, for example, as a founder, to hire the cheapest possible staff to give customer service, because that is something that they can do. You don't have to spend your time as the founder. Your time is better spent elsewhere, which is true from a pure returns ROI perspective. But if you look at it from the customer experience perspective, it is going to make the customer experience worse. So for a lot of entrepreneurs themselves, they don't actually only do this for the money. Like, we don't want to just make the most money. Like, we want to make money, don't get me wrong. But a lot of us, I think, also just want to provide a really, really good product. We also want to provide a really, really good service. And that does come at the cost of some returns. Like, I could make more money with all my businesses cutting corners in something like customer service or support and things like that. But I don't want to do that because I'm willing to make a bit less money in order to just provide an excellent service. But for a VC investor who always just wants more, they have to maximize the returns. They need your company to be a $1 billion hit, or else it's useless. So they will push you to cut corners in places that I wouldn't really necessarily want to. I've seen it so many times. There's so many products and companies that start off being so amazing, then they get funding, then they get another round of funding, and their customer service is replaced by AI, the quality becomes terrible, but their product is just good enough that they keep getting customers, even though the customers are complaining, and they keep pushing more investor money into marketing to get more and more customers, and they keep growing super fast, but it comes at the cost of the customer experience, which for me personally, like, I just wouldn't want to do that. And reason number 5, which is more personal, we simply don't need it. We are in a position where we didn't need the money to be able to pay ourselves a salary before the app makes money and things like that. Both of us, we already had other businesses that we could use to sustain ourselves, like more than sustain ourselves, like very, very profitable businesses as well. We don't need it to put money into marketing because my business partner has a big presence. He can just market it from his channels. Simply, we didn't have any need to give up control in our business because we were able to do this completely bootstrapped with absolutely no issues. And also a bonus point, what can often happen is that if you get funding for your business, you get multiple rounds of funding, and eventually you sell for a very big amount, you as the founder might actually be left off with less than if you sold for a much lower amount without VC funding because of what is called dilution. So the more rounds of funding you get, the more shares in a company you have to give to the investors, which means that at the end of the day, you might be left off with much less than you anticipated because you actually just had such a low share of the company left for yourself. Now you sacrificed 7 years of your life grinding on the lowest possible salary for this big day at the end. And if you're one of the 0.01% of that succeed, even then you might end up with less than if you had just taken things more slowly. You had just really focused on delivering an excellent product, keeping all the control for you. So to me, going for that massive $1 billion hit just isn't worth it. I don't need the $1 billion. I like the lifestyle that I have now. I'm not willing to sacrifice my lifestyle, get an investor who wants me to move to some place that I don't want to move to, hire a big team, which is something that I don't want to do. And for our specific case, it simply doesn't make sense because we don't even really need it. So this is not to say that VC funding never makes sense. There are many cases where it makes a lot of sense, but for us, it didn't, and these are the reasons why. If you're interested to know what the startup is, I will leave some links down below in the description. If you want to hear the story of how I built the startup and how I made $13,000 in the first day of us opening sales, you can watch this video right here and subscribe for all the updates from my startup journey. See you in the next video.